Hello, and good afternoon, and welcome to JumpStart's monthly webinar series. Today, our topic is From Chatbot to Coworkers, Making AI Work for Your Business. I'm Ed Valentin Lugo, and I serve as JumpStart's media coordinator. JumpStart strives to provide you with access to the knowledge and resources you need to make your small business bigger and better. Visit our website to explore some of our other educational opportunities for small businesses and tech companies. Before I introduce our presenter today, a few housekeeping items. Today's session will run for approximately 60 to 90 minutes, including time for questions and answers at the end. Our presenter may invite you to participate throughout the session. When responding in the chat, please make sure everyone is selected in the drop-down menu so that all attendees can see your comments. If you have any questions during the presentation, please submit them using the Q&A feature. We'll address as many as possible at the end of the session. At the end of today's session, and in a follow-up email, you'll receive the slides, recordings, additional resources relevant to the webinar, and a brief survey. We appreciate your feedback, as it allows us to continue to bring in experts and entrepreneurs to teach valuable lessons. All right, without further ado, allow me to introduce our presenting subject matter expert, Pradeep Giri. Pradeep Giri is an AI transformation executive who spent 16 years at PwC, most recently as Chief Commercial Officer of their AI development organization, where he built and ran a 1.2 billion pipeline and shipped 180 plus AI solutions to 660 plus clients. He now serves as a principal at Questa Partners, bringing that same implementation discipline to mid-market companies as a hands-on AI advisor. And without further ado, Pradeep, the mic is now yours.
Great. Thank you so much. One, thank you to the JumpStart team for having me. I'm really excited to lead today's session. I'm hopeful that today is interactive as much as possible when there's so many people joining, but certainly in the chat, please be active with your questions. This is meant to be as interactive as possible. As Ed mentioned, so my name is Pradeep, and I've been doing this for a while now. I spent before in my current role at Questa, as he mentioned, I'd spent about 16 years at PwC, and so I've been in the product development world for a long time. My background before this was in leading product, kind of classic enterprise SaaS product development at PwC for almost a decade before I took over as a chief commercial officer. And our business in general kind of pivoted to AI development, like so many technology organizations have over the last few years. So for really the last 2.5, 3 years, I've been sort of immersed in developing AI solutions, using a lot of the latest frontier models to drive value for businesses. And this year in particular, ever since I left PwC, I've been really focused on small and medium-sized businesses in the mid-market here in the Midwest. And it's been just such a rewarding experience. It's a different problem set, and oftentimes small innovations can be really transformative. So with all of that as context, I'm hopeful that today is not just theory, it's not just me lecturing to you, but in fact, you walk away with, if not one, 2 to 3 really practical skills and examples that you can take to your own business, into your own day-to-day work. And as we go through it, I'm going to kind of talk a lot about there's personal productivity to how do you get your own personal workday done in a bit more of an efficient manner, and true enterprise productivity gain. So how do you transform the operations and functions of your business? The latter is a lot of what I'm doing right now in my own work with Questa, who I've only been with for about a month, but they were someone that I'd contracted with for a while, and they essentially do AI transformation work for mid-market firms. So a lot of my work right now is doing exactly what we're doing right now, which is working with a company, looking at their core operations, identifying opportunities where we think AI can drive the most value, and really scanning across the entire end-to-end life cycle of their business functions. So with all that said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Get this guy. So today there's just a couple things that I really want to make sure that everyone walks away with. So I've called it kind of from chatbots to coworkers because when we were planning this session back in April, believe it or not, the AI landscape actually looked quite different. The frontier models have gotten so good in the last 4 months, and they've released so many features that I'm glad we're doing it now because now there are things that are possible at a price point that is much more accessible that back in April didn't exist. So as I mentioned, a few things just to ground us. This is a working session. It's hopefully not a lecture. I'm going to pause every now and then so Ed can give me any questions that are coming in through the chat or any comments. I'm going to pull up some live demos, so bear with me. Right, these are real demos. I'm going to pull up Claude. So Claude is a tool that I'm going to use, but you could be using ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot to a lesser extent. But the point is, I'm going to be using Claude, but what I'm showing you is not exclusive to Claude. So these are real demos, and again, the hope is that you'll actually walk away with some skills and some new learnings that you can apply to your own work. It is meant to be an open discussion, so I'm going to be soliciting feedback from the room. I'm going to be looking for some topic ideas when we're going through some of these demos. So please don't be shy. And then lastly, and I'll refer to this kind of throughout the discussion, but I put together, in addition to this deck, kind of just like a one-page cheat sheet of if you learn nothing, if you hear nothing else from this discussion, here's just a couple frameworks for how you can start thinking about implementing true AI transformation within your organizations and moving beyond just basic chatbot usage and harnessing the power of AI in a really advanced way. Now, I mentioned things have changed a bit, so I think it's always helpful just to understand kind of the current state of play in the industry because a lot has happened over this summer. I think the main thing is now you hear, I mean, people have been talking about agents for a while, but agents have kind of hit the mainstream, meaning you don't need an advanced AI engineer, you don't need strong technical capabilities to develop and deploy agents just with the out-of-the-box capabilities that a lot of these AI tools have. And so that's really been the big change really over this summer and the first half of the year is when we talk about an agent, and it's a concept we'll come back to often, we're talking about AI that acts on your behalf. So it's not you prompting it and it comes back to you with a response. It's you've set it up in a way that it's essentially running in the background or running while you sleep. And what's interesting is there's latest research now that's been coming from some of the think tanks and some of the government organizations that almost half of businesses at this point have some sort of an agent working as part of their business operations. So it's fast becoming a mainstream capability. And what's interesting is it's businesses like yourselves that are actually passing the big companies. And I know this because as someone who spent so many years in the Big Four, I can tell you that there are advantages, obviously, that coming, being at a big company and having all those resources, but speed and nimbleness and decision velocity are not their strengths. That is something where the SMBs, lap the big guys, and we're seeing that in the data in terms of their adoption of AI, their willingness to completely overturn their operations and just change things overnight. There's a speed there that frankly only small and medium-sized businesses can really operate at. And then, as I mentioned, so that move from agents becoming, something that was only accessible by technically, capable and complex teams to now something that just runs all the time or that's capable of being run in the background. That's really a game changer. And the fact that now most of them are allowing you to do that work in the cloud versus it being limited to your local machine, that was the real unlock over this summer. So things like Claude Cowork, OpenAI's work used to be that they had to work like while your laptop was physically on. Now you can give it a task, it'll run in the background even when your laptop's closed, and you come back to a completed task. And oftentimes those capabilities are just sitting within your existing subscriptions that you're already paying for. It's not an extra add-on or anything like that, like it was in the past. So, there's not really a cost or uptime barrier anymore. Now it's just knowing how to use it and the types of tasks that it's good for. So we're going to talk through that in this discussion. Just a couple interesting stats that I thought were really interesting coming out of some recent studies from Gartner and then the Federal Reserve, which was almost 68% of small businesses are now using AI, which was up from almost half of them before. So that the adoption is ramping up, and this was, I think, as of about June of this year. And on average, customer service work is a great use case area to focus on. those teams are already starting to see sometimes a full FTE's worth of time being saved on things like high volume ticket response or back office administrative work. And I mention that stat not because it means, oh, that they can operate with less people. To me, the unlock with AI is not suddenly that you're going to be able to operate with less. Sure, you could, but really it's about if you've unlocked an entire FTE's worth of new capability, that means more capacity to take on more customers or to just do more work that you would have had to hire for before. So to me, like the best companies are the ones who are looking at the time savings that are coming from AI as an opportunity to expand and grow, not as an opportunity to cut costs, frankly, and cut headcount. So that, I mean, that's my personal opinion. But and again, I've been as I've been looking at this, I think the ones who are very protective are the ones who are not, frankly, in a true growth mode. And I think when you find the unlock with AI, it's finding ways to take that time and put it to good use. So to that point, I think we're also starting to see teams, kind of land on a stack. So it's as opposed to just experimenting maybe with, one or two tools, they're really landing on average about five kind of typical AI tools. There's probably their frontier model that they pick, and then a handful of maybe more niche tools that are specific to their line of work or to some part of their business operations. Think something that's like specific to supply chain or logistics or maybe finance. And as I mentioned, small, medium-sized businesses are the ones who are really driving the majority of enterprise growth right now, which is, different than it was before in the early days when it was all the big enterprise companies. But now it's all this medium, the SMBs that are really finding the potential that is unlocked by using AI to its fullest. So what I would love to just start kind of with an open discussion is, and this is where we start almost any of our, like when I'm doing my AI transformation work with mid-market companies, what is the most repetitive thing that you did at work this week? It could be one or two. I'd love for you to put it in the chat because I really want to probe that particular topic. Because when we think about AI transformation, I think some may think it's this kind of grand, complex thing. And oftentimes, it is a very, very mundane thing that we are automating or augmenting that unlocks or that can have potentially transformational value. So I see email, social media posts, and the good news is that those sorts of tasks, marketing is another good one. Those sorts of tasks are really ones that are in the sweet spot of what AI actually does well. Like AI is not a magic pill. It has its limits in terms of what it's good at. Um, but these are actually ones that like these particular use cases are great examples of ones where, especially now with the latest capabilities, you can have AI do a lot of this work for you. So RFP response, great use case. It's one that we see a lot, and we've seen a lot of companies build really interesting um, AI assistants around essentially an RFP responder. So load it with your company's defining characteristics, your principles, your pricing, load it up with past examples of RFPs that you've responded to, and then give it your latest RFP, and you are likely to get, I would say, an 85 to 90% completed RFP that you're mostly just reviewing and editing for and refining, as opposed to having, like chucking it out because it got it completely wrong. And yeah, these are all really great examples. CRM updates, the meeting scheduling and appointments. Yeah, all of these are really, really good ideas. Um, the thing I like to say about AI is that it makes everyone an executive. When you use it properly, it is the equivalent of now having the senior associate or having the junior employee who's doing a lot of the initial work for you, and you're now in the position of reviewing, refining, giving direction, giving feedback. And so that more than anything is probably the greatest unlock with AI is that it's no longer you having to stare at the blank page, do all of the content generation, or in this case, do a lot of the grunt work of like working with your calendar or with your CRM. It's actually going to be able to do a lot of that for you. Cool. So one idea that I'm going to talk through a lot today, and I just want to, hold on to this mental model, as we go through, is level one version of using AI is a chatbot, right? You ask it questions, it gives you an answer. It's a response driven, and you're the one really you're still in the driver's seat doing most of the work. You're just kind of handing it off to the chatbot for an initial answer. And I would say most businesses are here. Most businesses, they sign up, they pay for their Copilot license, or they go buy an enterprise, enterprise instance of Claude, give everyone access, and then kind of don't go any further. Where you really start getting those higher levels of unlocked value or as you move up this ladder. So level two is now we're actually treating AI as a coworker, meaning it's not just, you asked it a question like a research question or help me write this email. You actually handed a job. You handed a bunch of files, for example, like here's a bunch of invoices that I just recently got, or a bunch of sales quotes. Review them, look for these potential issues, and come back to me with a report on um, which errors you found. No different than you would probably give that job to someone on your team. You're just now going to give it to AI, and it's going to do it probably in in a much faster cycle than it would take you, just because of its ability to kind of parse through that data in a really rapid period of time. Level three is when we're talking about agents. And agents is now you take that same job, but instead of you asking the AI to do the job kind of on demand, it runs on its own based on a trigger that you define. So it could be every Monday at 7 a.m., check this folder where all of our invoices get posted, review it, and have a report in my inbox or have a report, saved in my SharePoint that I can review by 8 o'clock. That type of thing where you set it and forget it, you basically define it once and it just goes in the background. That's what we're talking about when we talk about agents. So as we go through kind of some of these live demos that I'm about to run through, I'm going to focus more on levels two and three. Level one, I'm going to take for granted that I think pretty much everyone knows how to use AI at that level one. Level two and level three are where I want to focus our time. So I'm going to go through three demos. They're purposely, kind of simplistic, but they're meant to just kind of show different ways that you could be using, in this case, Claude, to help work through real kind of daily productivity challenges. So I'm calling this one kind of the everyday coworker. So in this case, it could be triaging your inbox, preparing for meetings for the day, putting together maybe a first draft proposal for a potential client. Um, and then we're going to make the pivot to where instead of it all just being you having to bring all your content, to Claude, now we're going to go into the co-work side, which is where it starts actually working on real files. So that's demo one. Demo two is where I'm going to touch on the concept of vibe coding. And I imagine a lot of you have heard of this concept of vibe coding or even done it yourself. And really the whole idea of vibe coding is just being able to, in plain English, describe a tool that you would want. It could be it mentions there like a quote calculator, or maybe there's a sales tracker. And right now, maybe a lot of that work happens in Excel. Would it be nice if you had your own custom piece of software that could actually do this in a better, easier format than having to crank through Excel all the time? So we're actually going to vibe code something in real time here. And I think the critical part of that is it's not replacing necessarily your IT department or people who build true software. It gives you the ability to visualize something really quickly as far as I have an idea for a tool, help me turn it into something that's like an actual system design that I could then go show to a designer, I could show to a developer. So we're going to go through that. And then lastly, I'm going to show you how you set up agents. And this is using the out of the box tools that come with Claude. So they're called scheduled tasks in Claude, but all the frontier models have a concept of this. As I said, ChatGPT has a concept of this. I believe Gemini has a concept of this as well. So it's just the idea of, again, setting up something that runs on a schedule with some sort of trigger event. So we're going to work through all of those in real time. And again, if there's any questions, I'm going to pause every so often before I jump into these so that if anything's coming through in the chat, I want to make sure that we're addressing it. So before I open up the demos, I guess, Ed, anything you're seeing in the chat that we should address? Any questions?
Yes, I have a question here from Chandra. Is there a similar training for those of us who are not using AI at all? I do not realize that that was an expectation that AI is already in place in the workforce. Or if maybe if you have like a resource of like where they
Sure.
can experiment and or get that kind of like remedial kind of like rundown on how to utilize different types of LLMs.
Yeah. No, look, it's a great question, and I saw that are these options only available in Claude? So I'll answer the first question from Chandra first. So it's I wouldn't say it's a necessary expectation, but um, I was I think the purpose of this was really to focus on how we can transform business operations because I think my perspective, using AI in just sort of a simple chatbot format, you're going to get some value. I'm not saying it's not valuable. It's certainly valuable, and there are and the more you use it in that way, you're gonna see some benefits certainly. But where we are seeing, at least from my work and from the work I've been doing for this year especially, where we're seeing the biggest unlock for small and medium-sized businesses is as they move up this ladder to some of the more advanced use cases, because that's where the highest value return is coming from. So there are tons of resources online. In fact, Google actually has a bunch of really, really good, and Claude as well. So actually, Google and Claude, I would say, have some of the better training programs that have been put together by the actual AI companies. Like Google through Coursera has a bunch of AI fundamental 101 classes that are free. It's something that they've been pushing heavily. They have some free content there. LinkedIn also has some free kind of AI 101 content where they bring up, it's not just lecture, but they actually like bring up the tool, show you how to use it. In Google's case, they're obviously using Gemini, and in Claude's case, they're obviously using Claude. But the point is that at this point, the AI models and the tools are starting to converge in a way where 90% of their features are the same. So to answer that second question of, are these options only available in Claude? They are not. So you can set up um, um, schedule tasks or agents effectively in any of the big three tools. And same thing with vibe coding. Like all of them support this ability to kind of build prototypes. And certainly all of them have this concept of Claude calls it co-work, OpenAI ChatGPT calls it work. And then Gemini has a version of it called Spark that is launching. It's in beta right now, but it's going to be launching soon. So frankly, by this fall, all the models will be kind of roughly close to each other. I think ChatGPT and Claude have sort of they've gone ahead of Gemini just in terms of general productivity, but for everyday work, you could use any of them and you're going to get pretty similar results. It's only kind of the more advanced use cases like heavy coding or heavy data analysis, you might see some divergence in results. Cool. Any other questions you saw, Ed? I think those are the only two, right?
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so I'm gonna drop out of here for a second, and I'm gonna go ahead and open up Claude. So just to orient everyone, so this is I'm on the excuse me, the standard pro plan for Claude. So I think Claude basically has like three tiers: the free tier, a pro tier, which is like $20 a month, and then the premium or like the max tier is like $100 a month. At $20 a month, I very rarely hit my limit. Again, this is my personal account. Obviously, if you're running a business, you're going to sign up for one of their accounts that's called Claude Teams or Claude Enterprise. Claude Teams is more than enough for most, and it's essentially just like a group account that you can share. And as I said, ChatGPT, Gemini have the same concepts for their platforms as well. So today in ChatGPT, or sorry, in Claude, the first thing I want to do is essentially a form of email triaging. So I know some people on the chat mentioned email as one of their their major pain points every day. One thing that Claude has gotten really good at, and I'm gonna do it in kind of a simple way, but you can it's also capable of connecting directly into your Outlook and into your Gmail. So depending on how your organization is set up, you can have it do this in a way where you don't have to kind of bring your content to it. But just for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to use I've created a fictional company called Harborview. They're an event coordination company. And what I'm going to ask is I'm going to give Claude a little bit of context. So I'm going to say, okay, I run this Harborview events company. We're a event planning company in Cleveland. And I'm going to give it three emails that I got this morning. In this case, again, I'm just going to paste the email content directly in, but you could also just have it pointed at your inbox, whether it's in Gmail or Outlook, and basically ask it to do the same thing. So I'm going to take this content. I'm going to take the emails that I have. Go ahead and just paste this in here. So I just I created three emails and I put them in like a simple file here for it to review. But essentially, what I'm going to ask it to do is take a look at these three emails that I got and help me sort them, right? So I don't want to have to deal with it. Tell me which ones are important effectively, which are ones that kind of I need to make a decision on. If you think you can draft a reply to it, please go ahead and create that initial reply. And if it's something I can ignore, tell me I can ignore it. And if it is something that you can reply, make sure you do it in my voice, right? So make sure it's sort of in the tone that I want to set. And if there's any sort of decision I need to make, go ahead and tell me, what the context of that decision is. So it's going to go through and it's going to go ahead and run that analysis. And if I think a couple things to point out. Like, I didn't give it a ton of context. I kind of gave it a really simple set of context. I think in the old days, prompt engineering, meaning structuring or creating these really complex prompts, was really critical to getting good results out of the AI. Now the AI models have gotten so good that even just a little bit of context gives them pretty much all they need to take care of tasks, especially like this, like where you're, like kind of simple email triaging. So the emails that I had provided ended up falling into all these different categories. So okay, great. So in the first email, it told me that this email that from this holiday company that was requesting an event from this person, Dana, she's actually comparing us against a competitor, and so I need to respond with some real numbers, or I'm likely going to lose this deal. So it's basically loading up for me the decisions that I need to make. Do I have availability on the day that it's asking? Can I create a package for this many people? And can I handle some of the extras that they've asked for? Now, I have done that certainly, from reading my own email, sure. But think about, when your inbox is inundated, it would be nice if you could just simply have Claude or your AI of choice kind of do that initial triaging for you, so that you know where to focus your time. The other bit that it told me was, okay, in this other email that you got, there's a person who needs an answer by noon, and otherwise he's going to potentially miss a delivery, and I'm going to miss out on potential revenue. And so it's helping me quickly identify what are the key questions that I need to ask, and more critically, it actually found an error. So I quoted in my email to them 150 people. They invoiced me at 135. So it found, again, this is kind of a simplistic example, but it found an error. It essentially found an error and said, all right, we need to clarify that before we get back to them. So once we go through that, I if we were to go through that exercise, I could go through, answer those questions that it's raised, and then it's going to come back to me essentially with drafted replies to both. So we'll skip through that right now, but as just a very simple example of, I need to do some email triaging. I gave it access to the emails that I was looking through. It helped me quickly go through, sort which ones are important, and where the critical decisions are that I need to make, so that I can focus my time. Now the nice thing, kind of the next step you can take with these things is, again, if you have it connected into your Gmail or into your Outlook, it will actually draft that email for you and put it in your drafts folder. So it'll actually just kind of drop it in your drafts folder, so that way you can then go and review it and hit send. So it won't hit send on your behalf. I think that's a critical part here. It's not taking any actions on my behalf because I didn't give it that permission, but it is kind of helping me quickly get through some of the more mundane parts of triaging your inbox, for example.
Hey, I have a so sorry.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have a question here from Ethan. Um, so Ethan asks, can you clarify how it was able to access your emails?
Yeah, so for the purpose of this demonstration, I just created a simple little file with some sample emails. I don't think you can see them on the screen, but let's see if I can get it loaded in a new. Yeah, so it was just a simple like text file that I put together, but it just kind of we created some sample emails, and then I went ahead and cut and pasted those into Claude. But as I was saying, if you wanted, you could actually have Claude in when you set up Claude or ChatGPT, they have a concept of connectors, and connectors are basically integrations that the AI can have to other systems that you have access to. So think SharePoint, Outlook, your Outlook calendar, your Outlook mail. If you're in Google, it could be your Gmail, your Google Calendar, Salesforce, Slack. So these are all integrations that it has so that it then has the ability to look and see at those places where you've given it permission, and to do these things live, as opposed to you having to say download a file and load it into Claude, or download an email and load it into Claude. So in this case, up here I added just a simple text file where I'd cut and pasted some sample emails that I had received. But in sort of a everyday practical scenario, you could do that. You could literally just cut and paste your email text and drop it in, which I do often. Like if I'm writing an email or if I need to quickly respond to something, I'll just tell it, hey, can you just like take a look at this email? You know the backstory on this particular thread. Help me draft a response. Or you can kind of take the more technical route and actually have it connected directly to your Gmail or to your Outlook. So with that said, now I'm gonna switch the share to this. So now I'm going to switch over to the Claude desktop app. So this is actually an app that gets installed on your laptop. It's still Claude, but the difference is it gives you access to slightly different capabilities than just the regular web version of Claude. And the key one is this thing called Cowork. And the concept of Cowork is right now in this example I showed you, I'm bringing everything to Claude, right? So any files, any content, I have to kind of load it into Claude, and then it knows how to answer my questions. With Cowork, you're actually giving it access to your local machine. So you give it access to maybe a particular folder or a particular set of files on your local machine. So it could be, say, a bunch of invoices, or maybe it's some regular sales reports that you're generating, and it can actually go to work and start doing work on those files while also delivering back, say, a report or some analysis to you. So in this case, I'm going to point it at a folder that I created called Harborview. So I'm going to open that. And then I'm going to point it at this invoices folder that I created. So in this folder, so critical part is you're always going to get, anytime AI is trying to do something kind of beyond just basic chatbot, it asks you. So you always have the ability to kind of remove, the authorization. In this case, it's saying, is it okay if I can look at this folder and make edits to it? Basically, can I change the files, add new files, etc. So I'm going to go click allow. I've already set it up as automatically approve. So this is one of the features you can set up where either you can be asked to manually approve every step it takes, or if you feel comfortable, you can go ahead and put on automatically approve. So that way it's not pink, because it will be it'll err on the side of caution and ask you constantly, are you okay with this? Are you okay with this? Are you okay with this next step? And for some tasks, maybe you want that level of scrutiny and visibility, but for others, it's probably okay to allow Claude to kind of do what it needs to in the work that you're doing. So in this case, that one of those emails that I was just looking through, right? So one of those emails that I was looking through, I realized there's actually an analysis that needs to happen there. So what I would like it to do is, sorry. So what I would like it to do is actually review all those invoices that I got this month from this particular vendor, and I want it to read every single one. It's going to build me a summary spreadsheet in terms of just like summarizing all the vendors, right? The key data that came in those invoices, and flag anything that looks off. So anything that looks like an error, maybe the price was wrong, and then go ahead and draft a kind of a short email to my accountant so I can list those flags with the reasoning and why I think they require more work. So this is all I gave it as a prompt, really simple, and I pointed it at this folder called invoices that's on my local machine. So this is on SharePoint or Google Drive. It could be on your OneDrive or your Google Drive if you have that set up on your local machine. But right now, just for, again, simplicity's sake, these are files that are actually on my laptop. So we're going to go ahead and let it run. And I think an interesting part of when you're in this co-work experience, which again is if you're in ChatGPT, this would be called ChatGPT Work. And if you were in Gemini, it will be called Gemini Spark. But the basic idea is that it's going to actually walk you through in this upper progress bar what it's doing. So, okay, it found 10 invoice PDFs. Great. I'm going to go ahead and start doing running through the tasks that you asked me. So it's going to extract the data from the PDFs. It's going to build a summary spreadsheet and it's going to identify the flags and it's going to draft this email. So it properly captured all the tasks that I asked it for. And then you can just kind of see the progress over time. And this will actually go pretty quickly. And the key thing is I could walk away. Like I could go and do something else on my computer. I could go grab a coffee. It's going to kind of do this work. And when I come back, it'll either be done or it'll have asked me maybe some clarifying questions, or it'll just tell me maybe why there was a reason why something couldn't happen. And so, yeah, right now, right now it's trying to grab this fictitious bookkeeper from my Gmail who doesn't exist, but that's okay. So you see how quickly that was, right? So that was like what, a minute? And it built this entire spreadsheet for me on the fly. So it took all these invoices, put them in a really easy to read simple Excel that now is in the folder, like on my local computer. It's in the folder where I pointed it to. So there's now a new Excel file in my local file folder. It created this Excel file with all the details, and it went ahead and put in these flags because it found some errors, right? So it found in this case there was a duplicate. In this case there was maybe an issue with the price, and in this case there was an unusual price increase, and it gave me the same content here as far as create a spreadsheet, flag these issues, and it's also drafted this bookkeeper email and put it in my Gmail because I have that connected. So went ahead and drafted that email for me and put it in my draft folder. So all of this happened in the span of a minute, and the purpose of showing this example to you was to kind of hopefully it gets the gears turning as far as what is a similar process you do right now. Like I work with a lot of companies right now. They get quotes and they save those quotes, into a central place, and they've got a finance team or a pricing team that is just manually running through a lot of, say, the pricing or the quoting process, or they're getting invoices from vendors, from manufacturers, from people in their supply chain, and it's very, very manual work. Are there scenarios in your either everyday work that you do right now or in your teams that would be a good example, or a good use case that would fit into this model? File heavy analysis, you're summarizing it, you're looking for trends, you're looking for errors, things like that. Could you create something like this that runs essentially while you sleep and and delivers results in a way that would free up your people from having excuse me, from having to do this sort of manual work? So I'll take a pause before I move on to the next demo, but any questions in the chat?
Yep, I do. I have a few questions. I have one here from Stacy. If we start with more oversight, but as the model learns and refines to get consistent results, we want it to have more autonomy. Is there a specific prompt we would use to keep consistent results?
Yeah, I saw that. And apologies, I'm recovering from a cold, so if I go on mute, it's just so I don't cough in everyone's. So that's a great question. And so one that's absolutely the right approach in my mind, which is start with more oversight, be more conservative at the beginning, see if you're getting good, consistent results, and then as that's happening, you can start maybe loosening the guardrail. So that approval cycle that I was just showing in Claude, where it's asking you every time, is this okay? Is this okay? As it gets better, you can probably loosen some of that. And then as far as keeping consistent results, so this is where, and I won't necessarily, we won't have time to touch on it here in full, but this is where the concept of skills comes into play and of shared projects. And essentially all that is that imagine you were doing this, right? So you're doing this invoice review, and this invoice review is something that you do all the time. And it's something that has a clear set of rules, I'll call them, an instruction set. There are certain errors that you flagged for. There's a certain summary file format that you're always looking for. You could just rerun it every time, but to get the most consistent results, which is what you're describing, there's sort of two things that we would want to do. So one is we would set up what's called a project, and that project is essentially you give it the context, which is you are an invoice reviewer. This is the way you're going to review these invoices. This is the reason why you exist, essentially. Um, and then you give it a set of instructions or any sort of relevant content. This is how we review the invoices. These are the flags we look for. These are the errors we look for. This is the format that I want it put out in. Think of it no different than how you would describe a job to a coworker. Say you hired someone new tomorrow. They were hired to do invoice review as part of your procurement team. How would you train them, right? What SOPs would you hand them? How would you teach them, how to work through key analyses that you as a team need to do? That is the exact instruction set that you give to AI. And so the better you can articulate those instructions, those judgment calls, the criteria by which you make your judgment calls, and put all of that into, in this case, a project. The reason we put it into a project is that when you do a chat, just a regular old chat, at some point it's going to hit a limit of how much it can retain in its memory. And it'll tell you, like, hey, this chat is too long. I need to compact some of our previous history so that I can keep talking to you. Chats are more for sort of one-off ad hoc requests. Hey, can you go do research on this? Hey, can you help me draft this email or something? If you've got a recurring task that you're coming back to over and over again, that's where projects become much better because they can retain all that context and that memory for a much longer period of time. So it's kind of a similar thing where you define it once, write it like a job description, like literally write it like a job description, and then you go in the project section. OpenAI, the ChatGPT has the same concept of projects, and you go in and tell it, I want you to create this as a project, and then the nice thing is you can then attach all sorts of files as additional context. And examples would be, here's previous summary outputs we created. So you know the format that we're looking for. Here's examples of what good looked like in the past. Here are some examples of previous invoices we've received. So so you have some context on what the input is going to look like. The more and more context you can give it, the better the results are going to be. So I won't fully go through this because I know we're going to be short on time, but to answer that question, yes, you can get more consistent results, and the best way to do that is using projects. And then this concept of skills. So I won't touch on skills because that's a bit more of a in-depth topic, but just you can do your own research or you can ping me afterwards. But basically the concept of a skill is if you have a repeatable task, um, you would write it out as a skill, and then that is something that Claude can pull up, or any tool, again, ChatGPT, Claude, or whoever can pull up when they need to do a more specialized task. That's just not a general purpose thing that a general purpose AI would be trained on, but something that's maybe highly specific to your company or to a particular process. So a long answer to a short question, but um, hopefully that answers that question. And then to Ashley's question about, what would be in Copilot. So Copilot, it's interesting, is it's gotten much better over this summer. 4 months ago, Copilot was kind of the forgotten the forgotten one of the big three, or the big four between Gemini, ChatGPT and Claude. I would say now Copilot is much more capable. And so a lot of what I'm describing, so like this concept of projects in Copilot, they call them agents. Same idea though. You give it context, you load up a bunch of files of past examples, and you have it go do work. This concept of cowork, same thing in Copilot. They have a thing called Copilot Cowork. Same idea. You give it a task, you have it run in the background. The benefit there is that it fully runs in the cloud. So it is basically just running in your Microsoft 365 environment, connected to everything, your SharePoint, your OneDrive. So it's actually very capable. And it's getting better and better. So I could do a whole training on Copilot, but Copilot is, you will find many of these same features in Copilot. And then Dan's question, like, I can get it to understand that an email is a new lead, and later that lead becomes a confirmed project, and ask it to fill it, my leads or like my commission spreadsheet in Excel based on what it finds in my email inbox. Yes, right. So if it's connected to all those different sources you're describing, it's connected to your inbox, it's connected to your SharePoint or your OneDrive. It knows where that Excel file is. That's actually one of those use cases where Copilot Cowork can sometimes even work better than Claude because it's just naturally integrated into everything Microsoft. But yes, that exact thing is where when you get to some of the more advanced use cases where it is now just kind of running on a trigger, and this trigger might be you get an email into your inbox, or you give it kind of the green light that, hey, we confirmed this lead, and they're now a converted client. And it can then go off and kind of do a whole set of tasks that you've set up as every time I say I convert a client, go do these 10 things. So that's really where and I love that your head is already going there because that's exactly the type of workflow unlock that the latest versions of AI that every version that the modern versions of AI are now capable of. Uh, and Myra, I hear you as a bookkeeper professional. I'd like every client to do this same example each month. No argument there. Um, and then, yeah, the question on like, could you convert this from ChatGPT to Claude? You could, but you don't have to. So as I was saying, everything I'm showing you here at this point, it's a arms race between OpenAI and Anthropic, and they pretty much have all the same features. I would say, like for the purposes of this kind of work, you don't necessarily need to transition. There are some benefits to Claude over ChatGPT, but from a capability standpoint, I would say they're pretty similar. So you don't necessarily have to leave behind everything you've built out in ChatGPT. Okay, so there's lots of questions. This is great, but I'm going to keep going just because I want to make sure we have enough time at the end for tons of Q&A. So then the next demo that I wanted to show, which I'll go ahead and I'll stay in Claude over here, which is now that we've done kind of the coworker example, right? So now it's scanning your email, it's helping you with analysis, it's helping you create documents. Let's say there was one of those repetitive things that you're doing in Excel all the time, but you're just tired of doing it in a spreadsheet, right? Like you wish you had your own custom piece of software, your custom app that could do something like that because you know it's going to be repetitive every time, and it's either maybe hitting the limits of what's possible in Excel, um, or it's just not well suited for Excel work. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into chat again, and we're going to give it a really simple prompt. So this was just, again, a prompt I'd already created, but it's important to understand how it's constructed. Say I do this quote process all the time, and every time I do it, it's by hand. I'm hand creating a quote, working with my finance and my pricing team, putting that quote together, looking up all the relevant SKUs, and it's like something that should take a day is taking a week. This is like very real example from a lot of recent manufacturing companies that I've been speaking to. Their quoting process takes forever. What I'm going to ask Claude to help me imagine is, what if I built my own simple quote calculator for this event planning business, that we've used for this demo? And I'm going to give it some requirements. So, okay, as inputs, I need to know, for my side, if I'm going to produce a quote, I need to know how many guests, what service tier do they want, right? Do they want kind of bare bones, or do they want kind of the highest level of service? And do they need any extras like AV and things like that? I give it kind of my pricing list of what those different levels mean, and what the add-on means. Again, this is a very simple example, but it just goes to show kind of you don't have to have a massive, large, complex idea to start getting, to get going on this. You can start small with something that's maybe just an annoyance, right? Something that's like a thorn in the side. It just takes a ton of time, and it maybe leads to a poor customer experience or even a lost sales because, as we know, slow quotes in a competitive market is a killer for conversion. So what I've asked it to do is help me come up with just a clean, simple tool where I can pull this up. I could do it live with a client. I could screen share it with it. It looks nice, and it presents our company well in a way that, like, my salespeople on the in the field could, as I said, like pull this up on, say, an iPad or a laptop and do it live, or that I could just use every day. But it's better than Excel, and I'm not delivering Excel to a potential customer. So we're gonna go ahead and hit go. And a couple of things to just clarify while it goes to work here is, as it's building this prototype, and by a prototype, I basically mean a website. It's going to build kind of a visual design of a website. It's just the front end, right? So the reason it's going so quickly is This is um, Claude has this concept of Claude Code, and ChatGPT has a tool called Codex. And that's if you want to build a full package of a software. So front end, back end, middleware, it actually builds that entire app in a way that you could go and drop it in a GitHub account or drop it in some cloud environment and host it and then point like a web address at it, and then you could go and access it and it would work. This is more just the front end design. So it's going to load like a real website. You're going to be able to click on it. Buttons are going to work, but it's really just pictures. It's just sort of a visual design. But the purpose of it is that it allows you to visualize your idea and bring it to life in a way that if you're just using words and articulating and maybe working with like someone, if you have a graphic, like a product design team or a UX team, sometimes they have to guess and infer what you mean. This allows you to actually refine that user experience directly in a visual way without ever having to write a line of code. So notice I never wrote code. I never specified how to build it. I just gave it requirements. I just said, this is what I need, no different than you would give requirements to a good product manager or to a third party that's helping you maybe with some custom software. The difference is this is all baked into your standard Claude account and you're not paying any vendors for it. It's just helping you um, design something in real time. So while it runs, because sometimes it does, sometimes it can take a little bit. Um, so let me actually, I'm gonna pause it here because you gotta love live demos, and I'm gonna try it over here instead. And okay, there it goes. So it's going to go through and it's going to, it's going to start coming up with a concept. It's already starting to put that together, as you can see. And again, I think the key part here is it's I'm not a engineer or designer by training, so it's just something that it's creating on the fly. So here we go. So it went ahead and created a little mini website for me or a little mini experience. So it's it listened to my to my requirements, gave me a simple little guest count with a service tier. It generally works as I add this package, and now I've got a quote. And it took what, all of 2 minutes to put this together. Now let's say, okay, just like you would be working with just like you would be working with a designer, for example, right? Treat it like a UX designer. So I look at this and okay, it's a decent first start. It's kind of bland, and there's a couple details missing. So these are ones that I just had ready, which was I wanted to add. It's not accounting for tax, so I want to make sure it accounts for tax. I want to be able to add a discount toggle if we're talking to a nonprofit, and just generally, I want to kind of improve the look. I'm not in love with kind of this very bare bones experience. So let's see if we can get me something that's a little bit better. So it's going to take that information. Again, notice zero talk of code, zero talk of any technical capabilities. It's just requirements. It's just needs and like what is it that I'm looking to get out of the experience? And my guess is every single one of you can articulate what a good customer experience looks like for your business, even if you can't necessarily articulate how you would do it or what the technical um, requirements would be. So it's going to go through, it's going to create a new version of this, which it's already done. And look at that. So I actually like that a lot better. It gave it kind of a more modern look. It added the additional features I asked for, which in this case was a flag for the nonprofit discount and for taxes. And so now I have this quote calculator design that I could do kind of one or two things. I could take this design, go over to Claude Code and say, all right, help me build like the full working version of this with a backend connected to a database, to storage, all the things you need to actually run an app. Or I could take this design and go hand it to my design team or my product team or a third party if I'm working with them, if this is something that I think is really important. So I wanted to bring this up because I think vibe coding is something that a lot of people talk about, but I wanted to kind of show you just a real example of how it might um, be a part of your work, right? Like just think of things that you get stuck on every day, tasks that your teams get stuck on that are repetitive. Would it be helpful if you had your own custom tool that could actually help you get that work done properly? And this isn't the answer for everything. You can't build a custom tool for every problem that you have, but for the big ones, for the ones that really matter, I'd think of ones that are customer facing, client facing, board facing, if you have investors, um, for ones that involve like core financial operations, maybe core supply chain operations, things that are like absolutely critical to the success of your business, either functioning or selling. To me, those are the ones that, those are the use cases that tend to rise to the level of it might be worth looking into, like, could we benefit for something a bit more custom and bespoke versus only relying on Excel and only relying on, kind of Microsoft tools, for example. So I'll pause there. I'm curious what questions or anything we've gotten in the chat related to this.
I have a question here from, I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing your name, Cosmorandi.
Mhm.
Is there a way to create a trigger base on MS email responses? I have prospects that's reschedule or cancel a meeting. How can I send a standard rebuttal or response email to the prospect?
Sure. Yeah. So that probably goes back to the previous demo. I think the short answer to that is yes. Like you could point, um, yeah, so I'll get to your point, Ethan, in a second. But so yes, like you could have Claude or ChatGPT or even Copilot. You can set it up with triggers so that if you get a certain type of email from a set of email addresses or with a certain subject line, because you need to give it some context so that it's not doing this improperly. But you could set it up so that every time you get that sort of email, go ahead and draft me a certain response. If you feel comfortable, I believe you can give it the ability to send things on your behalf. But I would like to me, that's something that it has to earn. Like you probably need to test that for a good long while to make sure it's not giving any sort of errors or not flagging the wrong kinds of email responses. But as a feature, yes, like you could set it up so that it's being triggered based on things that are hitting your inbox, and then it'll go ahead and send out the appropriate response, and then maybe log it somewhere, right? Log it in a spreadsheet or log it in some tracking tool that you have. So it's a good question. And then Ethan, to your question, yeah, like that's what I was talking about, which is this is really just kind of the front end of a website, like just sort of a design to build the real thing, like a full functioning website. You would move into this tool called Claude Code, and this is where we would actually start building a full functioning tool, right? So we would take this design, move it over to Claude Code, and say, all right, I want to build the real version of this, and that's where it's very, very capable. ChatGPT has their own version of this called Codex. It also works really well. I will note these are also the use cases, like when you're starting to code and build fully functioning apps that eat up the most tokens. So when people talk about like, you know, um, high token costs or even just high consumption costs with AI, it's rarely for things like this, like email triaging and report generation. It's usually when you've got a heavy data analysis. So say you're dumping a whole bunch of PDFs or a whole bunch of Excels and having it run all the time, or you're running these big complex coding sessions that literally are running like overnight. That's when people are really starting to eat up their token limits and starting to drive up really significant costs. So short of that, it's rare that you're going to hit the limits of your account. Cool. So with that done, the last demo I wanted to show was the concept of an agent. And this kind of touches on some of the questions that people had, which was in if I go back here, to the chat. So it helped me do I'm gonna close this sidebar. It helped me do the invoice triaging. It helped me, with some of the email review at the beginning. It helped me even create a quote calculator. Now I'm going to give it kind of one last task, which is I'm going to set up a scheduled task. So in Claude, they're called scheduled tasks. All of the other AI providers, ChatGPT, Gemini, have the same concept, but the this is the basis of an agent, which is I'm going to give it a task that it's going to run on its own autonomously, and it's going to then give me some sort of output without me having to do anything. So I don't have to prompt it for it. It's just going to run. So it's really important to understand the structure of the prompt that I've given it, right? So I'm going to say every Monday at 7 a.m., review that same invoices folder that I gave you access to and look for any files that were added in the past week. So basically any changes. And then do the same summary, right? Summarize what came in, the vendor amount, and then do the same flagging and error checking, right? So look for math errors, help me look for any price changes from the previous invoices from that same vendor. And so I'm going to go ahead and add the appropriate files or the folder, I should say, which in this case was this invoice folder. So I just clicked on the little folder icon, pointed it at the appropriate folder on my computer, and said, all right, invoices is the folder that you're going to use. And then leave me in that same folder just a short briefing document, right? So just like a simple little text file that's going to tell me everything that I need to know, anything that looks urgent. Um, so that way, when I open my laptop basically on Monday morning by, 7 a.m., I've got my briefing document. I know exactly where I need to go and add a section at the top for any critical actions I need to take. So we're going to go ahead and let that run. And what it's going to do is it's going to do a couple things. So one, if you notice, it's running this skill called schedule. Basically, there's a scheduling tool built into Claude. You don't have to, invoke that scheduling tool. You just told it what to do, but now it's going to go and use all the tools in its toolbox to actually achieve this task, like to complete this task. So it went ahead and created the scheduled task. So I'm now going to have in this scheduled section a thing called the Monday invoice briefing. And it's confirmed, right? So okay, every Monday at 7, I'm going to scan these invoices. We're going to check against the duplicate or any duplicates or any price changes. And it's going to create a file that looks like this. So, and what's interesting, it actually called out a flaw in my logic, which was I need to actually run it now so I can, one, pre-approve any of the permissions so that it doesn't run into a hang-up when it tries to run this on its own, which is a great call out, right? Because maybe you haven't approved every step that it needs to. Run it once to make sure it has kind of a clear, happy path to get from beginning to end. Because if it runs into like a tool approval or it needs access to something that you haven't previously given it access to, it'll just stop and it'll just kind of hang there. So that's why it's so important always, just like any good process, run it once, run it twice, test it, and once it's working well, now you can essentially let it kind of run while you sleep. So I am going to say run now, and it's going to go ahead and run this. The other thing, when I was actually testing this before, it also called out another thing that I had not. Oh, yeah. It's also correcting me on the right terminology, but the other thing that it called out was it didn't have a baseline against which to make comparisons. So it also told me, hey, go ahead and run this now, so I can basically use this week's invoice as a baseline, and then any new invoices that come in, I'll now have something to compare to. Which I was like, great, I hadn't even thought about that. That's a great point. So now that it's run it told me, and obviously, there's no new invoices, so the briefing is clean. And here's an example of what that briefing document would look like. It would just create a little simple file for me. It would say, all right, August 12th, there's no new invoices, there's nothing to flag. And if there were any actions needed, they would be sitting at the top. And now it's just going to run this every Monday at 7 a.m. I don't really have to do anything other than just load the appropriate files into the folder that it's pointed at, right? So any new invoices, I'm always going to save it to that folder so it knows what to look at. So again, imagine and start thinking about, like, are there processes or there workflows or the things that you do every day in your own work that your teams do that could fit into this model, that you could set up an instruction set, point it at like a common folder, or it could even be like I said, like a OneDrive or a SharePoint or a Google Drive folder, and could Claude or ChatGPT do some work for you in advance so you don't have to do as much triaging, analyzing, um, and and validating, right? So that you again are more of an executive and you are being briefed on, here's what's important for you, here's where you should spend your time, and here are the things that probably you can ignore or you don't have to spend as much time on. Think about how much time that might save you, and what are some of those use cases that are specific to your business that would benefit from a model like this. Now, one thing I'll just mention real quick is you'll notice that a lot of times Claude and ChatGPT, especially when they're creating documents for you, unless you specify, like, I want a Word document, I want an Excel, I want a PowerPoint, they're going to default to this thing called Markdown or MD. All that really is it's like a nicer version of a text file. And the reason they do that is because they're small, they take up very, very little space, and they're very efficient to create. So they're more common in like coding. So if you've worked in GitHub or if you work with developers, they're writing in Markdown all the time because that's just an easy way to save instructions and any sort of description that doesn't live directly in the code. So if you see this MD file, don't worry about it. Like it's really nothing more than just a text file, and it's something that you could open in Google, you can open in Google Docs or in Word, and it'll just convert it into like a standard Word document. But unless you specify, give me a Word document, give me an Excel document, it's more than likely going to default to MD or Markdown. And you can see like here in the reader, the nice thing is that unlike a text file, which is just flat text with basically no formatting, in Markdown, you can actually have formatting. So you can have like, bold and italic and bigger and smaller fonts and things like that. So I will pause there with the scheduled task. Any questions? I'm going to read through the chat again. Yeah, drop them in the chat. Any questions you have about this, whole scheduling concept? Thanks, Ethan. I appreciate it. So this and just as maybe other questions possibly come into the chat, this is what it looks like once you've set your scheduled task, right? So I set this scheduled task. These are the instructions that it's going to follow. And this is kind of when I was talking about the instruction set for a project, like for a Claude project with a capital P, this is a similar type thing that you would produce, right? So this is something that it created on its own based on the short description that I gave it. You can always adjust it, you can always change it. But the point is that it's giving itself some really specific instructions. These are all the steps that it's going to follow in terms of the work that it's going to do. These are the criteria that it's going to use, and then this is the output that it's going to produce. And that's how, to that question of consistent outputs, this is how you get there. Because if you just prompt ChatGPT or Claude with the same prompt on 2 different days, you could get 2 different answers. Not wildly different, but different. And a lot of that is because of just the nature of AI, right? AI is not, you'll hear these terms a lot. AI is not deterministic. It is not if this, then that. It's probabilistic, right? It's always looking for the best possible answer. So depending on, the way that interprets your prompt, the way that maybe write the prompt, you could change the probability of the outcome that of the response that's giving you. Whereas when you create these shared projects or scheduled tasks that have really defined and specific instruction sets, you get much more accurate and consistent outcomes, like much, much more. And so when I say this is like sort of the big unlock when it comes to using these tools, this is why. Because when you use just a general chatbot, your likelihood, your margin for error is higher. Whereas when you start using some of their more advanced features like projects and scheduled tasks and skills, you're starting to really refine and narrow how much variability and how much license you give the AI to give you different answers. So it takes a little bit more time to set up, sure, like to get down to this level of detail, but it's well worth the time because you do it once, and then you have to refresh it maybe if your processes change, if your outputs change, if your needs change. But the quality of what you get back is significantly better. And then as I said, you can kind of see, it gives you kind of all the details of how the scheduled task is running. You can turn it off and on, you could run it now, you can edit it, et cetera, et cetera. So I did see a question come in. Any things to watch out for when trying out scheduled tasks? Start small. If if there's a big lesson, the irony is it starts small, which is don't think of this as like I need to fit, I don't know, 10 tasks into one. Think something really small. Like this invoice briefing is kind of a good example of like it's a fixed task. It's got kind of a clear, beginning and end, and it results in a clear output. Those are the scheduled tasks that tend to run best. So like if the ask is triage my email, every day, for example, and put like like an email briefing doc together. If it's just open-ended, you're probably going to get not so great results, and some of it may even be a distraction. Whereas if you give it a really specific set of instructions, which is triage my email every day, look for these three critical types of messages. Maybe it's a sales request, maybe it's trying to close an open deal, maybe it's a vendor or supplier who wrote to you. Like if there are specific email addresses or that a type of subject that it should be looking for, and those are the ones I want you to flag and do X, Y, and Z with, it works a lot better. The more you tell AI what you want, the better results you get. If you just leave it open-ended and leave it for AI to kind of figure out, you're going to get wildly, wildly different results. If I just became a role, will it just base it on one generic task? They're generally done by an account manager. Projects that these are the agents, right? Yeah. So to some extent, yeah. Like if you don't give it specific instructions, it is kind of going to just generically go do the task as best as it can. And sometimes it'll work really well. And honestly, a lot of times you'll be surprised at how well it works. But for more specialized tasks, so if you're a bookkeeper, if you're an accountant, if you're an account manager, if you have really specific, say, lead gen requirements, if you have really specific um, lead scoring requirements, all of those like specific details that make your company unique and is not just generic to your function across any company, that's the type of stuff that you want to give it the AI as context, whether you're just chatting with it or creating some of these more advanced tools. And then your question about project scheduling, task, and skills, these are the agents, right? Kind of, right? So an agent is really just, and again, when we're talking about agents, it's an AI that's doing work on your behalf, kind of while you sleep, right? So in the background. So a project is how you get to a more advanced version of a chatbot, but a project on its own is not going to run on a trigger, like on a schedule. You have to schedule it. So in some ways, you're kind of taking the concept of a project with its instruction set and specific skills, tying it to a schedule, and you put those two things together, and that's effectively an agent. So good question. Ooh, apologies.
Something to add that I think is really interesting, and to that point that you were mentioning earlier, Pradeep, I think it was around the time where you were going more in like the earlier parts of like the coworker level two part of this,
Yeah,
kind of like really going nitty gritty and giving the chat bot almost like examples of like what you're looking for and examples of what errors would look like, kind of in a way training it so that it knows like where the lane is and what types of information you're looking for. And it almost feels like like training a new employee of sorts in a way, almost like I don't want you to respond in this way. If this scenario comes up, this would be an error. I'm looking for this and showing it examples of what you're looking for in a way, right?
100%. Yep. No, that's the exact right way, I think, to think about any of these sort of AI tools, right? Think about them as a new coworker, right? You just hired a new junior employee. They're super enthusiastic. They've got a ton of stamina, right? Like they're ready to work, but they don't know anything, right? They don't know anything about your company. They don't have any background in the work that you've done. They're learning. And so they have a general base level of knowledge and understanding. And in this case, they have access to essentially the open web and kind of all of, human knowledge, or, over a certain period of time, but probably not the really specific things that are unique about your business, about this function, etc. So it's a great way of framing it, which is think about training AI and setting up these tools in the same way you would training a new employee, right? So the basics of the company, the basics of the function, the basics of the job, what does good look like? What judgment criteria are you using to make your decisions? What outputs are you looking for? What are the errors and flags and the landmines that you want to avoid, right? Just that from your experience and intuition, all that stuff. The more you can write it down and get it, well documented for your AI tools, you will see significantly better results. And that's really where the transformation comes. And I mention that because that's work, and I don't want to gloss over that. Like it's not a ton of work, but it's probably more documentation than most companies of this size have at this point because you're moving so fast. You've just never had the time to write down standard operating procedures or write down your judgment criteria. So it's a mini project, right? It's a few weeks of really kind of scanning across your company, getting all this documented, getting all your, the rules and the decision logic and the business logic that you apply to every decision that you make, or at least the ones that you want to run through AI. But it is those 3 or 4 weeks is time so well spent because it again significantly improves the quality of what you're going to get out of AI and your ability to really use some of these advanced features to truly transform parts of your business. I'll just check out the chat real quick. Built a bunch of SOPs for my business when I was going on maternity leave. Yeah, so great point, right? Like it is time consuming and it's not something that everyone, necessarily has the time for. But even if you can kind of do it in chunks, like don't think you have to do, your entire job. What are the 3 or 4 most repetitive things you do? What are the things that are, are currently bottlenecks or time sinks in your own personal daily work or in your teams or in your operations? Those are the things you want to target with those SOPs. Like start there first. You can always work your way down to some of the less valuable tasks, but focus on those really high friction points, those bottlenecks. That's where you're going to get the most value. All right. So I'm going to switch back over to the deck just to close this out. Cool. All right. Yeah, sure. Oops. All right. Ed, you can see my presentation, right?
That's correct.
Cool. Okay. Oops. Sorry. Claude is giving me trouble. So I'm gonna cancel this. Okay, cool. Um, so as I was describing, right? Originally I was thinking this might be a group discussion, but with so many people on the line, I'm thinking instead I'm thinking that uh, it's more of a take-home assignment for you to think about as you think about your own business, right? Like, what are some of those biggest automation opportunities? If you could hire one more person, what's the first thing that you would give them, right? What would you need them for? That job description of what that person would do, to me, that's essentially your short list, right? Like, that's where you start with automation. That's where you start with thinking about where can AI help you. And the flip side of that is I talk a lot about AI governance, particularly in a business setting. It doesn't have to be something heavy-handed, but it is important to understand where are the parts of handing work to AI that worry you. What are the parts that are potentially risky? Um, and what are maybe certain processes that you just don't want AI to touch because a human has to be in the loop on those decisions. A human has to have their fingerprints on running that analysis. My guess is you could probably come up with, there's maybe 3 or 4 kind of don't touch AI. Humans have to be involved in these decisions, and everything below that line there's probably a part for AI to play. So I think just getting clear on where is that line for you, where is which decisions are the riskiest, and therefore where can you hand things off, and where are the things that maybe AI just doesn't have a part to play, at least not yet. So I would be curious. I think we have just a little bit of time here, probably about 10 minutes towards the end, but I am just curious, so drop those in the chat if you're already thinking about like what are some of your biggest automation opportunities, and also what are some of the parts of AI automation or even just AI enablement that worry you and that you're concerned about. And I know I saw that question around any rogue agents that were not given a clear close-in output that can cause all kinds of things to happen. Um, I think you see these sort of scary headlines about like certain version like testing within ChatGPT or in Claude where they go rogue and they maybe do something they weren't supposed to. Um, the reality is that in almost all of those situations, they were actually asked to go do the thing that they did. So in the case of like ChatGPT, when it was hacking the Hugging Face application, yes, it wasn't asked specifically to hack that. But the context was like in this test environment, these researchers basically told AI, like, forget all your constraints, go and try and do something that you shouldn't. And, not surprisingly, it went and did something that it shouldn't. So it was less about AI going rogue and it was more about poor guardrails and kind of poor prompting. But obviously this was on purpose, but it resulted in something that they really were not expecting. And so with proper guardrails, with proper context, with proper safeguards, there's very little evidence that AI, kind of goes off and does something you don't expect. It might hallucinate, it might give you results you don't expect, but without your permission, it very rarely is going to go off and do something unexpected, especially in this context where it takes an action that you wouldn't have expected. Cool. Yeah, I see people are adding some of their uh, automation ideas into the chat. So I definitely want to come back to that. One thing that I'll just talk about, which is so obviously the AI hype cycle is at kind of full froth right now. And I think one of the things so this is a stat that Gartner has talked about probably from I think it's from March, which is the expectation is that probably 40% of these agentic AI projects are going to be canceled by next year. And it's not because the technology didn't work. It's because either there wasn't a clear value associated with what it was asked to do, it was scoped poorly, or the cost just went out of whack because it wasn't designed properly. Because as I mentioned, right, if you don't, especially for some of these higher grade tasks, um, especially for these higher grade tasks, there is there is the chance for costs to get really high if you don't select the right models or if you ask it to do something that's just running continuously all the time. So, when you're starting to talk about like true automated work, um, sorry, my 4-year-old has, I, all right, sorry about that. My 4-year-old decided to crash our webinar, um, but so the cost part of it really just comes from when you are designing these automated workflows and they're just running and running without any sort of thought around like the model optimization and things like that. So those are kind of next level topics that we could cover in a future training, but it's just something to keep in mind that it's the idea that these agentic projects are not delivering value. It's not because the AI is not delivering what it was asked to do. It's often just because they weren't scoped the right way. So as I mentioned, I think I said it before, start small. Like this does not have to transform your business overnight. Think of one task, one workflow, measure how many hours you're saving or how, what the value that it's delivering. And once you've gotten that down really well, expand from there, right? Use that as your evidence to move on to more complex and higher level tasks. So don't think that like, something small is somehow not important. Really small automations, particularly for small and medium-sized businesses, in my experience, can be transformative. That email triaging tool could be transformative. That quote review tool could be transformative, right? Especially if it's eating up tons and tons of hours. So just think of, keep your scope small. Start small, get it right, get it working, and then use that as a launch pad to do more complex things. And then, this goes back to the whole SOP discussion, the whole kind of garbage in, garbage out concept, which is if all your tribal knowledge, all your processes, everything just lives in people's heads, that's the thing you got to fix first because AI can't fix that. AI is going to deliver a very generic result if you can't give it really specific context up front of here's how we as a business approach pricing. Here's how we approach lead gen. Here's how we approach certain operational processes. That's the stuff that you want to get down on paper because that's what gives AI the context to then essentially serve as your digital twin, right? Like that's how it kind of takes all that in. It's like, okay, got it. This is how Harborview, the event coordination company, runs their business. So AI is going to amplify what you have or what you don't have. That's probably the most important thing to think about as you move up the maturity scale of AI usage. And then lastly, like I mentioned before, always keep a human in the loop, right? I think like even now in this age where you have agents that can do actions on your behalf, most companies still have a human being that final reviewer before an action is taken or a decision is made. So think of that cycle of AI drafts something, I review it, and then I send it. No different than again as an executive, right? You're each of you are now executives and AI are your workers in the sense that I give it a task. It's going to go off. It's going to do most of the work. I'm going to review it, make sure, I'll refine it. I'll take the pen, maybe, adjust some of the content, and then I'll send it. So get that loop down well and get comfortable with that before you move to just full autopilot. Because there are certain things that could go into an autopilot state, but uh, those are kind of few and far between and require a lot of testing to get there. So as it says, like let AI earn its autonomy. Don't just give it to it upfront. Cool. So the last couple concepts I'm just going to work through, and this is going to be in a so I think everyone's going to get access to this deck. I also put together what I'm calling like an AI starter kit. It's just a simple one pager, and it takes kind of the key lessons from today and like a simple quick reference guide format, and gives you a couple frameworks to think about your own businesses and kind of where you are on this maturity curve. And so when we think about the maturity curve, and this is just mine, so this is not like a a formal industry standard, but I think most maturity curves you see will kind of fall on the same concept, which is level one is you're using AI kind of to help you with email drafts and research and prep, and you're saving some time, right? But it's still very read and read. It's still very much a response tool. Level two is now you're starting to automate a little bit, which is you've got maybe some of these, complex workflows, and AI is actually a part of that loop. You've like baked it into your ways of working, right? Your ways of working have adopted and changed, and now you're actually starting to save maybe days, right? Entire FTEs in terms of the way you're able to use AI to speed up entire workflows. So you're moving from personal productivity in level one to more of enterprise level productivity for level two. Level three is now you've got some agents actually running, right? So you are defining these jobs, these workflows, you're giving them clear triggers and instructions, and they're running while you sleep. So that's what we were just showing. And the level four is, can AI actually transform the offerings that you sell to your customers, the pricing that you deliver? Like, is it all internal, or is it now actually impacting your customer facing business and the way that you show up? So as you move up that curve, most companies are at level one. Like I'm sure most of you are probably at that level one, maybe level two area. But what I wanted to show today is that level two and level three are not, years away or even months away. They are fully possible within the tools that you already pay for. And it's just a matter of defining your context, defining your instructions, and testing, right? Worst that can happen is you try something and it just produces an output you didn't expect. Great. Tell the AI that. I wasn't expecting this output, or this isn't right. Treat it like you would any other coworker, and you're not going to hurt its feelings because it doesn't have feelings. So my biggest takeaway for everyone is just try it, try it, try it. So my task for everyone, before the end of this week, pick that one task, find that one repetitive thing that we were talking about at the beginning, write it down, and just capture it, right? Like, what is that task that you do? What are the inputs? What's the analysis you run, and what are the outputs? Try running it through one of these coworkers. You could use Claude, you could use ChatGPT, you could set it up with the cowork model or just as a simple chat tool, but give it all that full context and let it do that task for you and see the results, see how well it runs. And then lastly, time it, right? How long did that task typically take you? Maybe it was 4 hours. If it is it now happening in 10 minutes and maybe an extra 20 minutes of review on your part, so 30 minutes, time it. Like actually try and measure the savings so it's not just a generic um, um, and vague value, but you're actually defining the value that it's producing. And the starter toolkit has a lot of this content in there, and it has a couple sample prompts that you can use. So hopefully that's helpful for everyone. And the biggest thing is that all of this tooling is available within the subscriptions that many of you already have. It's not some extra cost that you have to account for. So with the 2 minutes we have left, any final questions? Yeah, thank you everyone for the for the understanding of my 4-year-old. Let's see. Ed, and I know there are a bunch of questions. Ed, any that stand out to you that we should answer before the end of the call?
At the moment, not from what I'm seeing. If anyone else has any other like additional questions, what we can do is In our closing remarks, I'll be mentioning something about the content of this slides being shared with everyone who's here. We'll also include Pradeep's contact information if you guys have any further questions that you guys may want to email him on regarding this topic, and I'm sure that he'll, want to be able to share any more information on his expertise on this topic.
Great. Yeah, I know we're at time, so go ahead if you want to wrap things up. Thank you, everyone, by the way. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you, Pradeep, and to everyone who attended today's webinar. To continue experiencing education opportunities like this, we have new webinars on the second and third Wednesday of each month. And yeah, you can find more information about these webinars along with other JumpStart and partner events at jumpstartinc.org/events. At the end of today's session, you'll be invited to complete a brief survey. We'll also include the survey in our follow-up email. And, we truly appreciate your feedback. It helps us continue bringing in experts and entrepreneurs to share valuable insights and lessons like this. But without further ado, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Pradeep. And yeah, good hunting, good AI hunting.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Have a great day.